I thought I detected some regional in your address.
I beg your pardon, Your Grace.
Your accent. One does not hear it often in London.
The Duke mocked her country accent, then he couldn't stop looking for her. They said the season of 1882 produced no greater spectacle than the arrival of Miss Eleanor Voss. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the way wildflowers are beautiful, untamed and entirely indifferent to being admired. They said it because she was the first woman in living memory to make the most feared man in London go completely, utterly quiet. He had mocked her first, of course. That is always how it begins with men like him. The ballroom of Harwick House was the kind of room designed to remind you of your own smallness. Gold leaf climbed every column to the ceiling. Chandeliers dripped with 1,000 candles and threw light across jeweled throats and powdered shoulders and the careful, practiced smiles of women who had been preparing for this night since before they could properly read. The men stood like expensive furniture, immovable, arranged for effect, entirely pleased with themselves. Eleanor Voss stood at the threshold and thought, I have milked cows in a dress finer than half of what I am looking at. She did not say this aloud. She was from Somerset, not a savage. Her mother had told her to smile. Her mother had told her to curtsy. Her mother had told her, with the particular urgency of a woman who has done the arithmetic and found the margins thin, to speak only when spoken to, and when you do speak, for the love of everything holy, flatten your vowels. London would forgive a great many things. A country accent was not among them. He was already watching her when she entered. She did not know this. She would not know it for a long time. That was the first mistake Sebastian Wyndham, Duke of Ashford, ever made regarding Eleanor Voss. He assumed that because she did not notice him, she did not matter. His name was the kind that had been chosen to impress and had always succeeded. He was tall and black-haired and gray-eyed, and his face had been called beautiful so many times that he had stopped finding it an interesting fact about himself. He had a mouth arranged in what appeared to be permanent mild contempt and the habit of looking at people the way one looks at a ledger, scanning for errors, finding them, moving on. His world had been arranged around him like a stage set for 31 years, and he had long since stopped noticing the arrangement. The hostess made the introduction. Miss Eleanor Voss, lately of Taunton, Somerset, niece of Lord Pemberton, come to London for the season. He looked at Eleanor the way he had looked at every young woman presented to him that evening, briefly, assessingly, with the mild boredom of someone who has received too many identical gifts. Miss Voss, he said. Your Grace, she said, and curtsied, and when she rose she looked directly into his eyes, which already told him something he was not prepared to receive. You are from Somerset, he said. He said it the way one might note the weather, an observable condition, faintly inconvenient. I am. I thought I detected something regional in your address. The pause did the work of a raised eyebrow. Taunton, was it? A market town, if I recall correctly. It is. We have an excellent cattle market. The finest Devonshire red in the south of England. I don't suppose you have ever seen one, a Devonshire red. They are quite magnificent. Large and patient, mostly. Though perhaps your Grace is more familiar with that particular combination than I have given him credit for. The woman standing nearest them turned the color of old plaster. He looked at Eleanor, this country woman in a very good dress who had just compared him to livestock in front of half of London's finest, and said, very slowly, did you just compare me to a cow, Miss Voss? I compared you to a Devonshire red, your Grace. There is a considerable difference. They are very distinguished animals. He stared. She held his gaze with the serenity of a woman who has survived February in Somerset and considers a duke considerably less threatening than a frost. Charming, he said. How pastoral. And the word pastoral fell from his mouth the way most men would say grotesque, and he turned and walked away, and the room exhaled around her. Eleanor watched him go with perfectly level eyes. Right, she thought. So that is the Duke of Ashford. She considered this for a moment. I have met more impressive fence posts. Within the hour the exchange had travelled the full length of the ballroom, gathered embellishments, and returned to Eleanor in a form she did not entirely recognize. By the time it reached his ear, and things always reached his ear, she had apparently called him a prize bull and questioned the integrity of his bloodline going back several generations. He was, his friends noted with surprise, not angry. He was, they noted with considerably more unease, interested. His companion Lord Calloway, 15 years of friendship, impeccably tailored, constitutionally incapable of leaving anything alone, watched the Duke watch Eleanor across the room where she had joined a circle of young women and was apparently making every one of them laugh. "She is Somerset," Calloway said. "Country girl up for the season. Respectable family, no fortune, passable looks, and the audacity of a woman who has absolutely nothing to lose." "She looked directly at me," the Duke said. "Women tend to look at you. Your situation being what it is." "No. Not like that. She looked at me the way one looks at an interesting problem one has not yet decided is worth solving." "How terrible for you," Calloway said. "It was rather," the Duke said, and he was still watching her across all that glittering distance. He did not seek her out. He told himself this firmly on Monday, and again on Tuesday, and for most of Wednesday. By Thursday afternoon he was riding through Hyde Park at precisely the hour Pemberton's household was known to take the air, and he was telling himself this was coincidence with the conviction of a man who knows he is lying and has decided to continue anyway. She was walking with her cousin along the elm-lined path. The cousin, a sensible girl, fell several paces behind the moment she recognized the approaching horse, because even sensible girls understand tactical retreat. "Miss Voss," he said, drawing alongside her. "Your Grace," she said, without breaking her stride. He slowed his horse to match her pace, which was frankly undignified for the animal and he was aware of it. "You are not surprised to see me. London is not so large as all that. Most women would stop walking." She glanced up at him, squinting slightly into the morning light. "Most women have not been raised by a father who kept prize bulls. You learn early not to stop moving simply because something large has placed itself in your path." The ghost of something crossed his face, not yet a smile, but the ancestral territory one might someday claim. "You have a gift for the agricultural metaphor. Somerset prepares one for many things," she said pleasantly. He said, too casually, "Does it prepare one for all of this?" She stopped then. Actually stopped, and turned, and looked up at him with the full, unhurried weight of her attention. The morning light fell directly on her face and he took this in without acknowledging that he was doing so. "Do you mean, Your Grace, does it prepare a woman to stand in rooms where she is assessed like livestock and found wanting for not being expensive enough?" A pause, light in tone, iron underneath. "I believe that is simply Tuesday in any English market town." He looked down at her from the height of his horse and she looked up at him from the height of her convictions and something shifted between them, some small tectonic thing, barely perceptible, the kind that only makes itself known in the aftermath. "You are not what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Deference." She turned and walked on. "I am sure you will find it somewhere. London does love to produce it on demand." He began appearing at events he would normally have declined. A musicale. The Pemberton dinner, which he had refused twice before suddenly and without explanation accepting. He told himself he was bored. He relayed this to Calloway, who told him with the directness of long friendship that he was behaving like a man who had swallowed something unidentified and was waiting to learn whether it was poison or medicine. He found her in the Pemberton library on the night of the dinner. She was not reading. She stood at the tall window with a book held loosely at her side, looking down at the lamplit street with an expression so privately, unperformingly sad that he stopped in the doorway and felt, for the first time in many years, that he was intruding on something worth protecting. He should have left. He knew this. "Miss Voss," he said, quietly enough not to startle her. She turned. The sadness closed off her face like a shutter, quick, practiced, professional. He had done the same thing too many times himself not to recognize the mechanism. "Your Grace. I apologize, I needed a moment away from the, she gestured vaguely toward the drawing room and everything it contained. You need not apologize. He came further into the room and leaned against the doorframe. I am also retreating from the noise. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, which surprised them both. Do you read? She asked. Genuinely, I mean. Not for appearance. What would reading for appearance look like? Carrying Tennyson to drawing rooms. Mentioning Dickens at dinner to seem humane. Never actually finishing anything. I read at night, he said. History, mostly. Occasionally natural philosophy. I find I cannot sleep without it. Natural philosophy? You find that unlikely. She considered. Incongruous. With the rest of you. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what are you afraid of, Miss Voss? Here, in London. What brings you to stand at windows when everyone else is performing for each other? The question arrived so directly, so entirely unlike anything he had said before, that she had no guard in position to stop her answer. Being made small, she said, before she could reconsider. Being made to feel that where I came from is something I ought to apologize for. A long quiet. It is not, he said. 3 words. No performance, no flourish. Just the plain, low certainty of a man stating a fact he meant completely. He straightened from the doorframe. They will miss you in the drawing room, he said. They will not miss me, but the arithmetic is different for you. And he left. She stood in the library for a long time, holding her book, and felt something she was not yet ready to name. Love does not announce itself in drawing rooms. It arrives through library windows on rainy afternoons. Through the specific quality of a person's attention when they look at you, not at your name or your prospects or the social mathematics of your existence, but at you, as though you are a text they find genuinely worth studying and have been studying quietly for longer than you realized. Eleanor Voss had not come to London to fall in love with a duke. She had come to find a respectable match, survive the season with her dignity intact, and return to Somerset where people said their vowels properly and did not treat a woman's inner life as a conversational inconvenience. She was not succeeding at any of these. The rain came without warning, as rain in England always does. They had been in the botanical gardens, not together, not exactly, though somehow they had arrived at the same path at the same hour, when the storm broke over them suddenly and completely, and they ended up sheltering under the same narrow covered walkway, slightly damp at the edges, close in the way that architecture rather than intention sometimes arranges things. This is your fault, she told him. He turned. I beg your pardon. You suggested the east path. If we had taken the west path we would have been at the gate 12 minutes ago. I see. The Duke of Ashford is responsible for the weather. You are responsible for the path. The weather is not standing in the dock today. And then he laughed. Not the polished social performance of a laugh, not the cultivated sound he deployed at dinners to indicate he had registered that something was meant to be amusing. The actual thing. Involuntary, helpless, briefly astonished at itself, reaching all the way to his eyes and staying there long after the sound had faded. She stared at him. It was precisely like watching a statue exhale. You are extraordinary, do you know that? He said. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't say things like that when you don't mean them. There was care in her voice, and effort in the care. I am very good at knowing when I am being managed. I grew up around men who managed women the way they managed horses, the right words, the right tone, just enough sweetness. I know the difference between the two. A silence. The rain fell in silver sheets over the flower beds beyond them. And if I meant it? He said. Then I would ask why. She was not looking at him. You could have any woman in London. Women with titles and fortunes and the correct accent. I am from Somerset. I have said unkind things to your face. I don't know how to be what this city wants me to be and I am no longer certain I want to learn. That, he said, is precisely why. She looked at him. He had moved closer without her noticing, close enough that the rain was beside the point and London was beside the point and everything except this narrow covered walkway and the particular quality of his attention was beside the point. I have spent 31 years in rooms full of women who gave me exactly what they believed I wanted, he said. You gave me a Devonshire red. He paused. I find I cannot recover from it. That is possibly the strangest declaration I have ever received, she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. I have very little practice with declarations. I am told I am better at not saying things at all. The carriage arrived. They separated. But neither of them was entirely the same person who had entered the rain. The following week Lord Ashworth began calling on Eleanor. He was handsome and warm and genuinely attentive and had 2,000 acres in Derbyshire and the easy good humour of a man with nothing to defend. He made Eleanor laugh without effort. He asked about Somerset with real interest. He looked at her as though she were a straightforward and welcome pleasure, which she was, and which she deserved. He was, in the private and carefully controlled opinion of Sebastian Wyndham, an absolute menace. Calloway stood beside the Duke at Lady Denton's garden party and counted under his breath. You have been staring at them for 22 minutes, he said. I have not. I counted. Ashworth is insubstantial. He is cheerful. Not all men can afford to be cheerful in company. Some of us have accumulated too much self-regard for it. I am going to get a drink. Something in his voice had changed, older, more careful, without the usual amusement. If you want her, say so. Before someone with fewer obstacles to his own happiness does it for you. I don't know what you are talking about, the Duke said, and walked away. He knew exactly what Calloway was talking about. He had known since the library. He had known since the rain. He suspected, with the cold self-knowledge of a man who has spent too long examining his own interior, that he had known since the very first night, since she had looked at him with the frank, unbothered appraisal of a woman who found him interesting in the way one finds a difficult equation interesting, worth solving, but not frightening in the slightest. He was, for the first time in memory, afraid. It is a law of London society, older than the century, that what rises must attract something intent on pulling it down. Eleanor had risen quietly and genuinely, on the strength of her wit and her warmth and something in her quality of presence that felt, to those paying proper attention, like clean air in a room that had been sealed too long. Certain people noticed this. Certain people found it inconvenient. Lady Cassandra Verner had constructed her reputation over 20 years on the careful, calibrated diminishment of other women. She was beautiful in the way expensive wallpaper is beautiful, impressive initially, ultimately just a surface. She arranged herself at the center of drawing rooms the way some women arrange flowers, for maximum effect, at the cost of everything around her. Eleanor came into the room and understood within 30 seconds what kind of room it was. One does feel for the Pembertons, Lady Verner said to the circle assembled around her, carrying her voice precisely as far as she intended it to carry and not 1 inch further. Such a liability, to import a girl mid-season with no accomplishments and a voice like a dialect map of the West Country. I am told Ashford spoke to her twice. A light, crystalline laugh that the circle dutifully reflected back to her. He was probably trying to understand what she was saying. Eleanor did not move. Her chin lifted 1 precise fraction of an inch. Miss Voss. Lady Verner said, seeing her, and doubling down with the particular commitment of cruelty that has been seen and will not retreat. We were just remarking on how charming your regional qualities are. London grows so tired of itself. A little rustic novelty is refreshing. Eleanor looked at her. Lady Verner. What a peculiar compliment. The pause was timed with the precision of a blade being drawn. I believe you intended it as an insult, which tells me considerably less about Somerset than it does about the quality of wit available in Mayfair. The room went entirely still. I grew up in a place where women worked for what they had and did not apologize for the accent in which they worked. I find I cannot quite locate the shame you are gesturing toward. But I shall keep looking. A small, perfect curtsy. Good afternoon. She picked up her gloves. She walked out. 3 chairs from where she had stood, entirely unnoticed until this moment, Sebastian Wyndham stood motionless in the doorway connecting this room to the adjoining one. He had come in partway through. He had heard everything. He had watched Eleanor Voss walk into a room designed to break her and walk out of it carrying every piece of herself. He found her that same evening in the east corridor of the Radcliffe Ball. She was alone, her back against the papered wall, her eyes very bright in the way of a woman who will absolutely not cry in a corridor because she has more dignity than the corridor deserves. "Don't," she said when she saw him. "Don't what? Don't look at me with that expression. Like you feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you." His voice had changed, the careful cool stripped back from it entirely, something older and more honest showing underneath. "I am angry. On your behalf. Which is new. You don't have to be. No. And yet. They will always say things like that," she said. "I knew before I came that they would. London doesn't want," she stopped. "It doesn't want what I am." He stepped closer. She did not step back. "London wants what it has always been given," he said. "It has been given the same things for 50 years. He paused. "I find I am no longer interested in what London wants." She looked at him then with all her guards down, the way you can only look at someone when you are too tired to hold the alternative position. "Sebastian," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. It landed between them like something struck from flint, small and bright and irreversibly warm. He was completely undone by it. "Eleanor," he said. "You mocked my accent. The first night. You said. I know. That was unkind. I know." He did not look away. "I have been unkind to many things I did not understand." His voice dropped until it was barely more than breath. "I am trying to do better." She looked at him. He looked at her. The music from the ballroom continued at the far end of the corridor. None of it existed. He took her gloved hand slowly, raised it, and pressed his lips to her knuckles, not the polished social version of the gesture, but something entirely different. Slow and deliberate and full of the entire weight of everything he had not yet said. "What is this, Your Grace?" she asked. Her voice was not steady and she did not pretend it was. He looked up from her hand and held her eyes. "The beginning of a very long apology," he said. "If you will allow it." He called the next morning before it was proper. Lord Pemberton's butler, a man of 30 years' experience, unshakable composure, and the rare gift of communicating entire paragraphs through the angle of a single eyebrow, opened the front door at 9 o'clock to find the Duke of Ashford on the step without an appointment, without a card yet presented, and with an expression the butler had never previously catalogued on a man of his rank. It was the expression of someone who has been waiting to move for a very long time and has finally, this morning, decided to move. He asked for Miss Voss. Not for Lord Pemberton. For Miss Voss specifically. The butler stood aside and let him in. She was in the morning room at the writing desk, holding letters she was not reading. She stood when he entered, because you stand for a duke, though her hands were not entirely steady as she did. "I have been considering what to say since 11 o'clock last night," he told her, without preamble, which was not his way, and the departure from it told her more than the words. "I have made very little progress. Honesty is considerably more difficult than I was led to believe." He paused. "I have been advised, however, by someone who has known me long enough to be unkind about it, that I am running out of time to say things that should have been said already." "Say them, then." "The night at Harwick House. What I said." He stopped. "What I designed to say. It was reflexive and it was beneath me, and I want you to know I have thought about it a great many times since, and I find the memory intolerable. Not embarrassing. Not inconvenient. Intolerable. You were not the worst of them, she said. That is not the standard I should like to be held to. Why are you here? She asked quietly. He closed the distance between them, not all of it, but enough. His voice dropped. Because I have looked for you at every event for 6 weeks, he said. Because I know which path you take in the park, and I know you read natural philosophy, and I know you take your tea without sugar, and I know the specific expression you make when a room is performing itself at you and you have decided to endure it politely until you can leave. Because you are the only person in this city who has ever looked at me as though I might not be worth the effort, and it was the most awake I have felt in years. He paused. Because no one has ever compared me to a cow, and I have not stopped thinking about it. A laugh escaped her, the involuntary kind, the kind no one performs. He smiled. For the first time in her presence, fully, without anything withheld, and the smile transformed him in a way that was entirely unfair and entirely his. You are the most infuriating, the most honest, the most real person I have encountered in 15 years in this city, he said. And I would very much like, with your permission and your uncle's, to have the right to look for you for considerably longer than a season. A silence settled over the morning room. The light moved across the floor. She did not answer immediately. She had not been raised to be easy, and she saw no reason to begin now. You understand that I come with Somerset, she said. That I will always come with Somerset. The vowels, the opinions, the absolute conviction that a woman's interior life is not a conversational inconvenience. All of it. There is no version of this where I leave any of that at the door. I understand. And you understand I will tell you when you are being insufferable. I have been composing a list since Harwick House and it is not short. I am told I need someone to do exactly that. You mocked me. Badly, and in front of people. I know. He said it without cushion, without qualification. I am sorry. A pause. I will be making amends for some time, I think. He looked at her. I find I don't mind. The morning light moved. London continued outside, indifferent and oblivious. Then I suppose, Eleanor said softly, you had better speak to my uncle. They were married in September, in the small stone church outside Taunton where Eleanor had been christened and where her father had married her mother and where 3 generations of women in her family had stood in good sensible wool and made promises they kept without exception. The Duke of Ashford, Sebastian, as the village came to call him after a period of mutual adjustment, was received with the particular directness of people who had no cause to be impressed by titles and saw no reason to begin. Farmers shook his hand and looked him in the eye and took their time deciding what they thought. Women assessed his suitability with the frank professional efficiency of people who have always done this practically rather than decoratively. A small boy of approximately 7 years asked him, with perfect seriousness, what a duke was actually for. He said he was still working that out. They liked him for it immediately. On a long summer evening, with the Somerset light going gold and slow across the fields, he sat on the low garden wall of the Voss estate in his shirt-sleeves, no coat, no cravat, entirely undressed by the standards of his other life, looking out at the landscape with the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he did not know he was looking for. Eleanor sat beside him, not performing anything for anyone, which was the best thing about being home. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Extraordinarily so," he said. "It is a rather unusual sensation. I am not entirely accustomed to it yet. You will grow accustomed to it." He took her hand. Not a courtly gesture. Simply took it and held it. "I intend to," he said. "At considerable length. You still owe me an apology for the first night. I know. I am accumulating interest. I am aware. It may take years." He turned and looked at her in the last of the evening light, with the full weight of the whole long journey from that ballroom to this garden wall, from the contempt to the rain to the corridor to this warm and unhurried evening, and his face held all of it plainly. "Good," he said. They said the season of 1882 produced no greater spectacle than the arrival of Miss Eleanor Voss. They were right, though not for any reason they understood at the time. It was not the entrance that mattered, nor the gown, nor the cattle comparison that traveled the length of a ballroom in under an hour. It was something quieter than all of that. It was the moment a man who believed he knew the precise dimensions of the world looked at a woman who refused to be made small, and understood, slowly, reluctantly, and then all at once, that he was the one who had been without dimension all along. She did not change him. People do not change each other. She simply stood, stubbornly and completely herself, and waited to see if he was worth knowing. He was. Eventually. They usually are, when someone makes them work for it.